Okay, welcome to another live stream where we're going to be talking about the new, kind of the new version of Logic Pro for iPad, but maybe in a different way. Maybe this is the first you've really thought about getting an iPad Pro or an iPad because you don't have to have necessarily just one type to run Logic. But say this is the first time you really thought about getting one and you're wondering what it can actually do. What peripherals you can run with it, what type of gear you can connect to it. I'm going to walk you through two parts of this tonight. One of them is I want to show you some of the hardware that I use when I use my iPad in a recording setup. And then we're going to look at many of the various plugins that we suspect are going to work just fine on the Logic Pro version of this, because of all of the instruments and many of the effects that you can get, I've already purchased them at one point or another over the years because I'm always looking to see how I can use my iPad in a professional way. And so I'll show you the things that we've discovered along the way. As a reminder, as we get started, if you're interested in seeing more content in the next couple weeks and beyond as we get into this whole thing, then make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell. It may be the only way you'll ever get on a live stream because I rarely give more than like 10 minutes notice. That's just how we roll around here. Okay, so let's start with some of the hardware stuff first. And in addition to what I'm going to show you, I was thinking over my shoulder here with my OP1 Field from Teenage Engineering. That would actually make a really interesting interface for Logic. You can do that with your desktop, but now we're going to be able to use something like that in conjunction with Logic on the iPad. It's an audio input and output. It has a little speaker, plus you can do headphones, and you have a MIDI controller built onto it. And so I think that could be really interesting. Anyway, that's not what I currently use for this. I have a couple different interfaces. One of them I can't show you because I'm using it right this moment. And that's my newest interface, which is the SSL12. I love that thing very much. It has the USB-C connector, plugs right into the iPad. I've been using it with Cubasis at various times. It has the 4 mic inputs, the TalkBack mic, which is its own separate input you could record. And then it has 8 over 8 at light pipe if you're using the lower resolutions. So I have a Focusrite 8-channel pre that I hook up to that, and I can get all of the 8 inputs. So that's a great system. This is the one I was using before that, and I still use this sometimes when I need just 1 or 2 inputs. This is the Steinberg UR22 Mark II. The main thing is you have to have essentially class-compliant devices, which means they've designed them so that they work without having to use drivers. Because at this point, we still don't have drivers for the iPad. And so anything that requires a driver to work, you can't use, but anything that doesn't or is class-compliant, you can just plug in. So this, with a USB cable, you can plug it right in. So that brings me to the first Apple accessory that everyone's going to want to get when you're using iPad Pro, and that's this little dongle right here. So that should focus in. And this one, I really like this one for a few reasons. One of them is it has the HDMI, so you could plug this right in and have your external monitor connected. It has the USB, which they have the newer versions of this as well. But I like this because a lot of my devices are still not the USB-C format. And then it has power. So that charges my iPad. It also helps, as far as I know, power the things that I plug into the USB. And so from there, what I'm using is just a little hub. And this hub just has 4 ports on it. That's all I need for this. I have other hubs that I sometimes use, but right now they're connected to my Mac Studio. But something like this is great because then I can plug in my audio interface, and I can plug in a mouse or a keyboard if I want to. I can plug in a little hard drive. Although you can't run off the hard drive, it's still nice to back things up. You can also plug in like a MIDI keyboard or other USB style instrument. And so all of those things go through that one important dongle thingy. I have all the other cables here too. Here's the cable for the USB interface. Here's my power supply. All of that stuff works or it doesn't. That's the one catch with all of this. And I think a lot of people are going to be, going out and saying, let's get all ready for this new Logic thing. Let's make sure our interfaces are working. And they're going to plug stuff in and it's going to be like, oh my gosh, how do I troubleshoot something that's not working? And the truth is you don't. There's so little we can do for troubleshooting. The good news is something like this, as long as it has enough power, has always worked for me. And so this thing, it has two options. You can do it off of the USB 2.0 power, or you can do a 5-volt DC. So you could plug that in as well. If you have an interface that can plug in, that's usually better. But it's not always better. Sometimes these ones, like this one, runs off USB bus power just fine as long as I'm plugged into something like a hub that's plugged in. That's the key with that. But when I go into Cubasis, for instance, sure, this will show up. And I'll be able to choose inputs and outputs. When I have more than two, I can plug inputs and outputs and decide for each track. But that's Cubasis itself. GarageBand, for instance, is a lot more limiting. And that's what we're going to look at in a few minutes. But you need to figure out which hardware you're going to want to use for this, or all the little promo videos. And I'm actually super ticked at the promo video. I did a live stream last night talking about all this, and I played just a little bit of it. The sound was on for maybe a fraction, like a second, maybe at the most. But the video played. And this afternoon, YouTube blocked the video because Apple requested that it be blocked. I deleted the sections of the video, and then it popped back up. But no good advertising deed goes unpunished. Now they don't know if I'm saying good things or bad things or just copying things or whatever. So they didn't bother to look. It's all robots, but whatever. But in that, you don't see a lot of people with interfaces. You see people just using an iPad, either with headphones or through the speakers. And so it's always clear what Apple thinks people should be or how people should be using their products by how you see their promos. And so they're thinking, get a pair of the AirPod Maxes and just run off Bluetooth, right? Have a delay. Who cares if you have a delay? And then Maxim in the chat, hello. And then Michael saying this may foreshadow Logic and Final Cut going to subscription. It might. I mean, that would be their dream, I think, if it was okay. I've spent a lot of time talking about this. It's certainly not a deal breaker for me to have a subscription model for Logic on the iPad, right? One of the reasons I use Logic in the real world is after paying thousands of dollars in the early years for the versions, and I've been using it since before Apple bought it. So a number of years. It was expensive, and some of those costs were paid by employers, and some of those costs were not. Some of them were paid by me. And so I've enjoyed, almost a decade of not having to pay upgrade fees at this point, except for computers, which some of those my employer has bought and some of them I've bought myself. So I have some skin in the game for sure. And I know what you're talking about, Michael. I'm getting there in a second. The subscription for the iPad, I don't mind paying $5 a month, but I don't know if I'm going to want to pay a subscription for a version that I've been using for a decade without paying anything. And you have to imagine, even if they say, so here's the catch with all of this, right? Apple says, oh, you know what? This is Logic Pro on your iPad. It's the touch version, but it's the Logic Pro, right? And you can go back and forth with projects, which I've heard mixed things about actually. I know Final Cut, they're saying you can't go back and forth. You can just go forth. In Logic, it says it's a two-way street, but who knows until I actually talk to someone who's either used it or I use it. And they're like, yeah, $5 for this full version of Logic. You know that if they were to release a subscription model for Logic on laptop or desktop in OS 10, that it wouldn't be $5, right? Even though they say it's the same thing. It's Logic Pro. It's like there's different tiers of these things. And so I doubt that it would be the same exact subscription. If they came to me and said, you know what, no, we're going to upgrade Logic Pro and add every feature you've ever wanted. We're going to add everything that you, Sam, have ever wanted in this software. It's going to be $5 a month for both platforms. Sure, I'd pay it. If they go to like $20 a month, I'm going to look other places, you know? I already spend $20 a month on certain things. I have Reason Rack, which I love the creative sounds that come from that. It scratches an itch that Logic doesn't always. But that's kind of like my spot, you know? It's like I'm not going to add another $20 thing on top of that and then another $20 thing on top of that. I use Final Cut Pro. I don't want to add another subscription for that on top. Anyway, we can talk about that more. But tonight's really not about that as much. We all know how we feel about... we all know how we feel about subscription stuff. It's not the cost more than the principle, right? That's what it really is. It's like, what happens if this is a true story about something? It's like, Hulu or something, right? I was traveling and lost my card and had to put a hold on it. Real easy to do. Got a new one sent in the mail. And then all of a sudden I couldn't watch Hulu until we got it sorted out. I didn't realize it. It's like, who wants to have that situation and all of a sudden you can't use your software? Easy to fix. What a pain. So something like that. So let's talk though. I showed some of the hardware. If you didn't see what I was showing at the very beginning, go back. There's a lot of little pieces. It's possible to connect full audio interfaces and MIDI devices, microphones. All of that stuff can be done. The thing I like about this device I was showing here is that it has the HDMI built right onto it. And so you can just use an external monitor, make that the heart of your studio, but also have the touch interface in one place and the full screen if you want to look up. Cool. I think is going to be relatively pleasantly, surprisingly easy for most people who want to get into this. And so don't worry too much about that piece unless whatever you have doesn't work. And then troubleshooting is going to be a nightmare and good luck. That's what I'll say about that. Let's switch though, because a number of people are curious about exactly what this is going to look like. And I have up here on my screen, this is my iPad Pro screen real time. Thanks to the joys of streaming, right? I probably can get rid of the Logic background here just so we don't have to have that in the background as well. So now it's just a black screen, me and Logic, right? And this is not Logic. Scratch that. This is GarageBand. which looks a lot like Logic. And that's where this came from. Make no mistake that if there's 2 poles to this planet that Logic Pro for iPad came out of, right? We have what we call Logic Pro, OS 10, and we have GarageBand, right? 2 opposite sides of the planet. The new Logic Pro grew out of the GarageBand side. No question. It has a lot of the same looks to it, has the same formatting to it, just an expanded feature set. Someone said, okay, let's put a mixer and we'll make sure that the data that tells you where your fader is a language that Logic Pro speaks, but it's the data that was created by a version of GarageBand, right? I mean, so it's all ones and zeros in the end, but whatever. This then becomes kind of our litmus test or our example for seeing what currently works potentially in Logic. So that's what we're interested in tonight a little bit. We have the ability to look through all the sounds, which many of them are ones that will be in there. The interface for playing certain instruments will be in there. And so we have a lot of stuff. But here, under the external option, is where we have the audio unit extensions. So these are the ones that currently work that I have installed for instruments. We'll look at the effects in a minute. I don't have tons. I have more instruments on my iPad than this, but not all of them are AUV3, Audio Unit version 3. But I have some really cool ones. KQ Dixie in the top corner up there, that's a DX7 clone. Not just a DX7 imitation. When you program this and attach it to a DX7, it programs the DX7. It's mathematically identical, and I can load up all the original DX7 ROMs directly into KQ Dixie. It's one of the best things about having something like an iPad is something like that costs I think when I bought it was like $5 or something. And it's an exact sound clone with some additional features. It's incredible. iSem, which is like a SEM Oberheim, which is amazing from Arturia. We've got the Model 15 and the Model D for Moog. We have the VCS3 or the Synthy. We have a bunch of instruments from Cycling 74, I think. I think they're probably still from there. I don't know. The MI Rack, a big modular synth, an accordion, which is not just any accordion. It's an amazing accordion. So we can also look at the Inter Audio app. And we don't know, or I suspect, rather, that based on what I've seen in the documentation, Inter-app audio stuff are not going to work right out of the box with Logic. But maybe they will. So we'll hope so, because you can see my instruments go a little bit bigger. I have all the other Korg stuff, the iProfit, the iWave Station, the IMS-20, the Reactable Table, which I think is kind of an older app now, the Animo, IMPC, the patterning, things like Thor, Nave, Gadget. I mean, there's a lot more stuff that expands out when you're using this format. So we have to wait and see exactly if we're going to be able to use the inter-app audio format until we have to see the documentation. Let's load up the audio unit extension. That's one of them, because these load directly inside GarageBand. The other ones are like not side loaded, but they're essentially simultaneously loaded, and they connect, but they're not exactly in. Let's do Model D. And so we're going to be looking at a lot of Logic projects like this, right? I know they have the new little tiles that are going to condense this, but when you open up the tile, it's going to look essentially like this. So we'll have, no sound. I don't have the sound hooked up because it wasn't a priority in a live stream for that to work right this moment. But it's going to look a lot like this. The graphic interface of that instrument, top half, keyboard, the bottom half, and they're going to be rescalable and so forth. There's a lot of small questions I have with this. For instance, when you're using this, I don't know how many of you know with the True Depth camera, there's a little smiley face over there, right above the G2, right here. Turn it on. This uses the True Depth camera to track your face movements. And then you can use it as a modulator. So if you open up your mouth, that will modulate different parameters of your instruments. That's the kind of thing, honestly, that we can't do in Logic for OS X, but I'm hoping that they're like, yeah, let's incorporate that into here. I mean, they've already had it in GarageBand. If they leave something like that out, they're missing the whole point of this whole medium. And so I think that they really should, but if they don't, we'll find out. I don't know if I actually saw that in any of the images. I'm gonna have to look a little closer again. But cool. So a lot of these AUV3s are designed already with this kind of form in mind, and so it's like this is like having a mini Moog. And I've got one of the Behringer Model Ds, and on campus we have 2 original mini Moogs. And it's like I love having this on the screen. It's third best. The originals are number 1, the Behringer's number 2 because it's tactile, and this is number 3 because it's on an iPad and I can touch the things in the place where they belong, as opposed to just using a mouse or something else. Okay, cool. So let's look, though, because we are going to have to figure out the mixing thing. Now, we have an actual mixer in the new Logic for iPad. And in here in GarageBand, we don't exactly. We still have, for instance, track settings. So quantization, transposition, recording, all of that stuff that we would need. And this program is really powerful. I don't want anybody to think, wow, it's like I would never use GarageBand for iOS. That kind of attitude is short-sighted. It's just different. And in many ways, I think it was Apple's experiment with reinventing the format of a DAW. And so I think what they've come around to is that they need to sometimes compromise and make things what people are used to and familiar with, rather than always thinking of brand new things all the time. And in this case, the mixer is going to be something that we all really like. Not tactile, it's still a piece of glass, but it's more tactile than a mouse, right? And so we can put up multiple fingers and move these around. Great. I don't think, we probably can. So I can do that here on the screen, 2 at a time. It's just, horizontal instead of vertical, right? But it's still a multi-touch interface. I can do that. That's still more power in some ways than we have any other place. But over here on the left side, where it says plugins and EQ, we have this real simple compressor amount, and then we have a treble and a bass. Okay, cool. Let's click on the actual header for that. And this brings up all of our plugin slots, of which we have 4 in the middle. I don't think we can actually pull out the compressor, but we can move it around. And then the visual EQ at the bottom. And then 4 more in the middle. So I can click on this, and you'll see the audio unit extension. And now these are a lot of the plugins I have currently installed that we can use. So some basic ones at the top, some that come with instruments. I have a few more that I don't currently have installed. I have some of the Eventide. Trying to think if there's anything else. A few others. I do like that I can use some of the ones from the synthesizer instruments, the spring from the Synthy, etc. And then we have all these ones from Apple. This was a new edition, I don't know, a year or 2 ago. I can't remember exactly, some time ago. But we have all these ones that are the Apple AU effects. They were clearly thinking of stuff in advance. And now we have things like their reverb, right? And this is the type of format that it looks like. So we have basic controls, nothing fancy. We can change the algorithm, stuff like that. Let's come in here. Some of these are better than others. And there are some out there that I just haven't paid for that are even better. And so that's something to take into consideration. You can spend, hundreds of dollars on a bundle still on the iPad for certain effects. But all of these would come in and we would have the graphic interface for them still and the ability to move things around. Cool. Plus MS mode, stereo mode. Some of these are really useful. Let's look really briefly at the ones we have from GarageBand: Bit Crusher, Chorus, Distortion, Flanger, Microphaser, Overdrive, Track Echo, Track Reverb, Tremolo, Vocal Transformer. Something like Vocal Transformer is just going to have these little sliders and nothing else. Visual EQ, I'll be really glad to be done with this. Because with the visual EQ in here, it's a 3-band, bass, mid, and treble, and that's it. So really limiting. I hope we'll get more, but theoretically, even if we come in here to this, let's do. Let's see. I don't know how many this parametric EQ has. I might just have one. Okay, I wonder if any of these have more than just one. That's what I was wondering. I just, in my head, was thinking of it. Let's take that one out and put a new one in. Parametric. Yeah, I'm not so sure. iPod EQ. Everybody needs that, right? I swear we had some sort of graphic EQ. Am I missing it? I don't see one. We do have sound isolation here. Ooh, that's kind of fun. So like a noise reduction. There was a question in there from Totigares about inserting third-party effects into GarageBand. And the answer is yes. That's what I was showing a minute ago. All of these under AAU extensions at the top here, these are all third party. These are not part of GarageBand. So for instance, I have a TC Electronic. This may crash it because it hasn't been updated as nicely as I'd wanted it to be. Looks like it's okay right now. So this is like TC Electronic or Helicon stuff, including pitch correction and guitar stuff and harmonization. It's like I feel like I'm going to sneeze. We'll see if the sneeze happens. Whew. This was a nice one. This plugin has been a good go-to for certain things when needed. But you can see it's a little bit tedious. I don't know if you can see. You can watch what I'm doing on the screen, but it's a little tedious to go through and find this. I'm hoping so much of this will be better in the new version. So you can always click on Find More in the App Store. They want to push you there. And so we'll see what the latest stuff is. Some reverbs, vocal effects. There's the Fab Filter for $30. Pro Q3, Pro C2. There's a Mic Swap Pro for $20. Virtual orchestras, instruments. I have like real orchestras and Logic for OS 10, so I haven't bought anything for iOS. SuperSynths. Ooh, there's an update for that. So I've got 3 out of those 5. Some delays. Oh, there's a noise one that I have, just don't have it downloaded. Okay. So of the ones they're recommending, I don't have all of them, or most of them even. So cool. Parametric EQ. Let's go back to here. The one that I've ended up using most of the time is this one from Zmores, which is this. It's decent. It sounds like an EQ. It's not bad. And it has enough bands that's far more useful than the basic one that comes with GarageBand. All of this, again, will be changed once we have the new version of Logic, right? Because we're going to get a lot more of the Logic plugins with the full capabilities instead of the limitations. Trying to think of what other stuff right off the bat. So there's a few things that will hopefully be long history. One of them is this real tendency of GarageBand to always want to do things in like 8-bar loops. If you record and you have like a song section, it's like you can say automatic and then it will just record out, but you have to turn that on. So you don't even have the ability to like set that right off the bat, unless you create like a pseudo template where you just have a project. But even that is like not an easy thing. In the settings, under advanced, we can tell to do 24-bit audio resolution. That's like one of the only things we have here. We don't have anything else. We can tell it to work with Bluetooth MIDI devices. Yay! We can run this with other GarageBands where you work like as a group. I've done that with students, or I think that's the jam session actually, which is kind of interesting feature. Arranging in GarageBand is what Toe Tigra says is horrible, and I agree 1,000%. Let's go back into the browser for a moment. The sound library is the thing that's coming to Logic. Essentially this right here. And actually I should probably... I'm serious. I'm not going to show that for more than like that 1 second. Because you know that those faces of those famous people are going to trigger YouTube to like block this video like it did the other one. So stupid. We are getting more of the performance mechanisms in terms of like the keyboard. I know I've seen this in the images for the new Logic where you can do chords and you swipe up and down and it plays different notes. So we're going to get a lot more of that type of stuff for sure. Another thing that we are bound to get some version of, which is this, editing. So swiping over, right? I've seen the little scissor tool, but here we have to do the split and then we move this around and then we like slice it down. We are almost guaranteed to get some stupid editing things like that. Whew. And Totigerous, just so you know, you don't have to have Logic for the iPad in order to do the guitar strumming. It is added in the full version of Logic. And I have the Logic behind me. Let me load up a guitar real quick. So I'm going to load up a guitar, acoustic guitar. You should be able to hear that because that's the sound I have actually turned on. And then I'm going to leave this app for a second and just go in the Logic remote. And with the Logic Remote, we can do... Right, so we have that one. I don't know. I swear there's a strum option. I don't do this enough. Where's the strummer? Perform using... That is what I'm using. Well, this may be a little lost. Oh, there it is. So that is Logic. This is not GarageBand that you're looking at right now. This is the Logic Remote. So we're going to be getting like the best of both worlds here, and to be able to do it all on the iPad instead of having to connect to something. Because there is, even though I've got lightning fast, dedicated Wi-Fi, I mean, this is way better if I connected it to the computer without doing screen capture at the same time. But I don't know. There's like a weird latency because I'm doing the screen capture at the same time. But what we're missing with all of this, of course, is in GarageBand, when we do something like the guitar, this one, we'll do the same notes, right? It looks a little different for this one. Well, let's switch it over to acoustic so it's the same. You won't be able to hear this. The big difference is when I go to chords, I've got a strummer, an auto strummer. So we actually can have it do patterns and things. So I'm assuming we're going to get something like this in there as well. Maybe a merging of all these features. But we'll have to wait and see for sure. Okay, so... other questions, right? What other questions do you have or thoughts about this? I'm actually excited for some of the percussion stuff. I know in the Logic Remote, when we have something like, you can't see this, but I have it in the background. I'm going to do a drum machine designer. I'll load up Atlanta. And then we come here, step sequencer. I mean, I'm excited to be able to have this touch type interface. All part of the software instead of always having it separate, having to have an iPad and my computer, or using GarageBand and all of the stuff that comes along with that. I really want to be able to have everything in one place and have it be a lot better set up. Okay, cool. So we looked at the hardware, at least the hardware options that I'm using, and some of the tools that come with that. You'll, at least for the time being, you're not going to want to do things wirelessly connected to your iPad. You're going to want everything hardwired. That's just something that's going to be important until we sort out more of those formats to be lower latency, which only a few people are, and only in very specific formats. And the iPad Bluetooth is not one of those formats. So we'll have to see if Apple, in the next versions of the iPad, come out with some new thing. The problem with everything right now is that, and this is going to be my opinion, so don't be upset at me or at me in the comments or whatever, but I think we're reaching a crossroads where governments are getting involved with tech development, sometimes for better and sometimes for worse. The better times, say somebody like Apple is determined to like change their plugs every single device that they release, right? They make USB-C and then it's USB-D and USB-E and USB-F, and every like year and a half they release a new format. That's a horrible thing. Not just because I don't like it, but for the environment, if nothing else, right? It's horrible for garbage and waste and recycling, and it's horrible for money. It's like, why do I need to go out and buy new things every like few days to make this work? So a government steps in and says, you know what, let's regulate this. Use the same thing as everybody else. That way it can be a more universal approach and be less wasteful. Okay, I guess I can kind of get behind that a little bit. When a company like Apple, though, innovates and they're told that they can't or that they need to follow other rules because somebody else doesn't like it. Say a politician is being banned. This is an American thing. So for those of you not here in America, I'm sure it's the same other places too, but it's extra bad here. Say I'm at another company besides Apple, and I don't like the innovation that's happening there, and I'm giving a lot of money to this politician for their campaign, and I say, you know what? This thing that they're doing doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me. I've got a panel of experts that have looked at this, and they say that this shouldn't be this way. That politician's going to be like, okay. I mean, they just gave me like $1 million to run for office, and they're going to bring this up. So we're too much sometimes in the political world, and sometimes not enough. It's really a hard balance, and I hope all that made sense. I'm not really super extreme either way, but I hate it when stuff that I do gets messed around with by other people. And so I can imagine a company that innovates being told they have to, do something differently because of someone who's not an expert can be frustrating. So for better or worse, we'll see how that all lies out. I'm really happy about one of the new versions of iOS that's going to allow side loading in Europe, according to the new policies that the EU has passed, because it's going to be a good test to see just how effective it is and if it works. You could probably already jailbreak your device and do a lot of that stuff without it. But it's nice. It'll be nice to see what Apple does, and if it's something that can be done in a way that wouldn't hurt too bad, and then we can do it here in the States. You never know. So we'll see. GarageBand. Oof, this thing is brutal. It just is. I don't even think we're in GarageBand right now. Where are we? There's GarageBand. It was so ahead of its time when it first came out, and now it has stagnated. So this is like a really... I'm going to be probably calling Logic Pro for iOS GarageBand Pro. I think we should all just get in the habit of calling it that, because that's what it really is, instead of Logic. It's going to have to really do a lot, and Apple doesn't do a lot when it releases something brand new like this. It does. So there's two thought processes. One, it tries to do everything mediocrely. Tries to do everything mediocrely, and then it tracks what everybody's using, right? You think that Apple can't track what you're doing on your software? I don't know. It seems a little bit short-sighted. They're definitely keeping track. Maybe not overtly, maybe even not covertly, but certainly with people who have agreed to send in data usage, which you have that choice, right? And so everyone who's clicked that, they're seeing all that information. They might be able to infer some of the other information without. I don't know. That's conjecture. But they're taking all that data and they say, ooh, we added in this really cool feature. This new beat breaker or whatever, And everybody is using it. Every single user that we're tracking has got that happening and they're using it. What that means is they're going to develop that. And if they're like, ooh, shoot, this other thing that we added, this like really cool little button that like everybody can use to get to like the most amazing tool feature, and only like 2 people have ever used it. Well, that means that they're not going to develop it. It'll probably be disappeared in a future version. And so, that's kind of how it works. They're not going to be developing stuff in situations that nobody's using it. So, cool. That's how it works. And so, if you really want something to be developed, go out there, start a YouTube channel or, a Facebook page or a Reddit thread and publicize the crap out of something, and that'll get their eyes on it more than like complaining one person. You know what I mean? Turtle Theory says, let's call a spade here. I'm gonna let the jury stay out on that because I don't know. Here's the problem with me, with what I think. Or here's what I would have been probably even happier with overall. Except I'd like the portableness. I really do like the portableness. So here's I'm going to back up a little bit. I'm working on something here at home, and I'm about to go to the university to teach a class. I can just be like, okay, pop over on my iPad, carry that little thing with me all the way up, and all of a sudden I plug it into the TV in the studio and into the audio interface there, and I'm off. I get to keep working on my actual thing. What's the difference between that and having like a MacBook Pro, right? A laptop that has it on it, like one of the new M2 ones that are super speedy. That's better than this. There are times when a laptop is not good for me. I'm like 6'4". I'm not a particularly short person. And when I go on like airplanes, it's like a laptop is too big. They got us squished in like sardines. The person in front of you leans back and you can smell their hair. And so an iPad in that situation is going to be way better. And I'm about to go on a trip next week. And I wish that the new software was coming out before it, because then I'd be like, here's an airplane test. But it's coming out the day after I get back. So the next trip. And then Turtle Theory has some other good questions. Let's see. Top of the list of unanswered questions. And this is actually not an unanswered question, I don't think. Or I guess the way you're asking it might be unanswered. How do they plan to support all the third-party plugins that actual pros use? They're not. They're hoping. They can't force a company to release something, right? And so until that company decides they want to do it, they're not going to do it. So maybe there'll be some option like freezing that track, but it gets convoluted. It's not going to be great. And then the next one, the portable idea is nice, but this whole idea assumes people are not using, third-party plugins. I personally think too many people use too many third-party plugins. Or really, they have too many third-party plugins and they're using like 5 of them. But people got to have the ability to choose the tools they're using, right? I mean, seriously. Apple would love it nothing more, I think, sometimes than getting you to use the stock plugins and not worry about third-party stuff. Until they release enough tools to replace that, it's, again, non-starter in many ways. So I think Turtle Theory is right on the money with that to a certain degree. The goal, I mean, they've done the audio unit format. They've opened it up so developers, part of the developer group can get the specs and create for it. I mean, dear goodness, I think ChatGPT could make plugins in the AU format. I've asked it in the past to do some coding, and it wasn't perfect. A little bit of skill on my part, and it would have worked. But we're at that point, right? This isn't rocket science at this point. And so developers could be doing it. But the question is always this: are we going to get our money back from doing it? And if they experiment with it, which many companies have, then maybe they'll get their money back. But they might not. So let me switch over real quick, because one of the things we should all be thinking about is the QBasis integration here. Call that a new project, right? So this is a perfect example of taking like a desktop app into this world. It's the best one we've had up to this point. We'll see if Logic surpasses it. I suspect it will, because Apple's developing it for its own stuff. We'll see. But one thing that was really smart was the deal that they made. Where are they? Down here. With Waves. So we have the Waves audio track, which has basic EQ compression, right? Or the delay, or the L1, right? Or the Q10, which is better than any EQ, the default EQ in Logic or GarageBand. And then we have the real-time tuning too. So we have all this stuff that we could be hopefully getting from Waves, unless Waves signs some sort of agreement that they would only do it with them, which would be stupid, maybe. And Qcoletti, who knows about the full Mac version? I know it's going to go up a point to 0.8 for basic compatibility, but that might also include the new Beat Breaker and some of the other stuff. But I doubt. It would be insanity for a Logic team, which is already, not the size of like the iPhone team, you know what I mean? But it would be insanity for them to release two new flagships simultaneously, because then they would just be dealing with insanity while they're fixing two broken things at the same time. And so hopefully what they're going to do is release the one, just do enough compatibility with Logic, see what really works with the iPad version, and then incorporate that into there within the next 1 to 2 years. I mean, that's really the Apple timeline for everything. And so they're going to do one, let it see what happens. If they get overwhelming amount of support and everyone's like, this is way better than I thought, which sometimes happens. It's like not everything that Apple does is bad. Clearly, some things are received more poorly, but they just came out with a point update that gave us gain tool and a number of other things. We got, the MIDI assignments in the last year or so. It's like a lot of things we were asking for. It's like they were like, you know what, we're about to do something really good or really stupid with the iPad. This could be really bad. So let's start actually listening to what users want in terms of updates. And let's give them a few of those before we dump the iPad thing on them. I mean, that could have been what they did too. I mean, I can just imagine some of their conversations. But they work for Apple, which is the promised land, the chosen field. You can't do anything wrong there. Or if you do, you're in some serious doo-doo. But man, it's like the Midas touch, right? So there's got to be some weird, complex thought processes that go into the people who work there. Oof. Yeah, for sure. No small task. Well, we've been going for about 55 minutes, which is 4 minutes short of where I wanted to be. But a lot of different sides to this. It's too bad that everyone's just talking about the subscription thing. I mean, Apple had to know that that was going to be a thing. And maybe they just don't care. Or maybe they think they're so big that that people will do it anyway. Or maybe they thought this is the time to do a subscription when it's a product that everyone's been salivating over for years. And they're going to complain, but they're going to do it. And then they're going to love it. So, who knows? I would halfway agree with you. It's a long wait, but I got a lot of stuff happening between now and the 23rd. So I'm not going to be losing any sleep over it for a few minutes. Let's see. I think I'm getting ready to wrap it up, though. Okay. Any other stuff? Anyone want to talk to? Oh, the film people. Film people so far are happy because they know that they're not replacing Final Cut with Final Cut for iPad. Everybody seems super thrilled because a few of the things they added are so intelligently smart that it's they're not ignoring it. I think that they're super excited. They don't feel threatened by subscription models. Oh my gosh. Not as far as I can tell. I'm sure that some of them are talking about it, but not like the whiny musician babies. iJustine came out with one, and iJustine didn't just come out with a video about the promo. I don't know if you caught it, but iJustine has touched it. Oh, Totigerous. So that's a joke that I have with me and my former mentor. When I was in school, the one piece of advice I was given was, if you really want to go in the music industry, take a child psychology class. I took it twice. The first time I found out it was really hard and really good science. It was the only class I ever failed at the university ever. And I took it again, and the new grade replaced the old grade. So technically I don't have a failing grade. And I got an A on it the second time because I thought, you know what? Okay, let me take this seriously. And my mentor said, take it because when musicians get under stress, they revert to their childlike selves. And so just learn how to take care of kids and you'll be fine with musicians. I guess that was the joke. Some truth to it, for sure, over the years, and myself included. I definitely have some tendencies. And I love that joke. How do you make a musician mad? Give him a gig. Oof. Way to roast them all. All of us. It's like you can only make fun of groups that you're a part of these days. So here we are. I'm making fun of the groups I'm a part of. Okay. 58. We have 1 minute, 15 seconds. If there's no other good comments or discussion points, we're going to end early. But we have a good community in Logic. They're a little bit touchy when it comes to subscription things. And that's okay because no one likes to be told what to do. They just had to look at what happened with Waves just like weeks ago to know that that was not going to be a popular choice. But Apple is not Waves. Apple's bigger. And they invented the iPhone and iTunes. Oh, and they want you to think they invented Logic. They didn't even invent that, so whatever. Yeah, I use Apple stuff all the time. I do the Arcade for my kids. I love the arcade for my kids. There's no ads on those things. There's so many benefits to using games from the arcade than buying third-party games, which are pay to play or pay to continue or whatever they call those things. The arcade is incredible. So it's like little money goes out every month. So I'm not a big thing about that. I mean, who listens to Spotify without doing the subscription model? Oof. All the people who are complaining about subs for Apple are the ones who are borrowing passcodes to get into Netflix. It's a mentality thing that I think we have to hear all the voices and try to understand each of the groups that are part of this community and not just ignore them. That's the part. It's the ignoring of the people who have an issue with this that I think is the hard part. If they had just said, you know what, $5 a month, or if you want a perpetual license, then it's $100. And that would give them 2 years to make an update that would cost $100. So it'd be the same money either way. They could have done this in so many other clever ways, but they're doing the long game, like I've talked about. Okay, let's pull the plug. We're 1 minute over. Thanks for chatting, for those of you who are chatting, and for those of you who are just hanging out and stalking. I think that's a perfect place to be as well. We'll be doing more of these. I want to talk more about some of these tools as we find out more. Tonight was all about the third-party things that I'm using, that I'll be using in Logic when it comes out. None of them overlap with my desktop, except for the Moog instruments and the M5. Those are the only ones I have in both places. But otherwise, everything else is different. So we'll talk. See you all later.